What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry, just days away from the start of Patriots training camp, and there is lots to talk about, friends. We're going to talk today on this episode of the Next Pats podcast, some breakout candidates for training camp. Young players, maybe some new players, some veteran players potentially mixed in there as well. We're going to be taking your questions in sort of a pre-camp mailbag. Thanks to all of you who contributed to the bag this week. But what we'll start with today is Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin and the Terry McLaurin story looms not only over DC, but I think in the backs of the minds of Patriots fans, as it should. This is one of the best receivers in football, friends, and he is disgruntled, not happy with his contract. He is about to be 30 years old, and so the Commanders may be not happy with his asks in terms of what he's looking for financially, maybe in terms of term and the length of this next deal that he is looking for. He does still have a year left on his contract. An excellent player, an excellent citizen, an excellent teammate, an excellent leader by all accounts through everything he's done over the last few years in Washington, playing with quarterbacks that, quite frankly, no receiver in his right mind would ever want to play with until last season when he played with Jaden Daniels. And, oh, wouldn't you know it, he submitted yet another 1,000-yard season, which is basically what he does every single year. He has done it every single year, save for his rookie season all the way back in 2019. So, why should this matter to the Patriots? Well, it should, and they should be keeping their eye on it, and they are, because he's one of the best receivers in football. Now, he's not available yet. He's not available yet. But if he does become available, with training camp looming, with potentially McLaurin, his representatives, maybe Washington's front office, all looking at each other and a little ticked off, quite frankly, does this grow to the point, does this rift grow to the point where it becomes a split? And if it does, how can the Patriots benefit? This is a Patriots podcast. This is a receiver-needy team. If you've been listening to this podcast, you know I feel that way, despite the addition of Stephon Diggs. To me, they are still one of the worst groups of weapons in football. I ranked them 31 out of 32. Adding Terry McLaurin, even if it's for a high-end draft pick, even if you have to give him a boatload of cash, adding Terry McLaurin would go a long way toward fixing your receiver room and helping your young quarterback develop into the player you hope he eventually becomes. You talk to people in football, and they describe Terry McLaurin as the perfect Patriot. Again, look at his experience in Washington. This is a guy who is used to playing for teams that are trying to get to where the haves of the NFL are going. He finally tasted that just a bit last year, making it to the NFC Championship game, being able to play alongside Jaden Daniels. You think he'd have a problem playing in New England? A team that, while an up-and-coming team, I would describe it as, is not necessarily one of the haves, is not necessarily a contender. So he's been in that spot before. He's also not going to be the kind of guy who's making a lot of noise if things aren't necessarily going his way. He's not going to be the kind of guy who's in his quarterback's ear and putting pressure on his young quarterback to make sure that he's feeding him the damn ball, which can be detrimental for young players. The perfect Patriot. The speed is still a factor for Terry McLaurin. Toughness, route running. He gives them something they don't have. He gives them a take the top off the defense kind of threat. Don't have one right now. I'm sorry, Kayshon Boutte, who did reel in a handful of deep attempts, doesn't quite count. Nor does Stephon Diggs at this point in his career. 5 years ago, sure. Not now, where he is probably at this stage more slot receiver than anything. Pop Douglas, electric athlete, not exactly a deep threat. Kendrick Bourne, not exactly his game. So if you want to add that kind of element to your team, which, quite frankly, they've been looking for years. Think back to the last time Josh McDaniels was here in 2021, and what defenses were able to do when they eventually figured it out. Patriots somehow were still able to put up pretty good numbers, but over the breadth of that season, you saw it eventually over time. Defenses discovered you can just load the box. We will dare you to throw it into one-on-one coverage on the outside, and we have no issues with that because we have no confidence in your ability to beat us one-on-one with a single safety in the middle of the field. Why would we double anyone? Why would we not send extra bodies into the box to try to take away your run game and your short to intermediate pass game? I fear for the Patriots and their fans that they may experience a similar fate this season if they're not able to add somebody like a Terry McLaurin. And let's be honest, I don't believe they will be able to. But, that story still looms, and we do still have to talk about it. And we have the perfect person to talk about it with us here on the podcast today. NBC4 Washington's JP Finlay, the best when it comes to covering all things Commanders, all things Washington football. He's also the co-host of the B. Mitch and Finlay Show down there for the Fan in D.C. Tremendous insight every time we talk to JP, and today is no different. So without any further ado, let's get the scoop on what's going on with Terry McLaurin, what JP is hearing about the situation, and whether or not he believes Terry McLaurin might ultimately shake free from Washington and leave open the possibility for him to land here in New England. Here's our conversation with JP Finlay. All right, JP, you were front and center in that scrum of reporters talking to Terry McLaurin earlier this week. What's running through your mind as you're hearing him express his emotions in that way when it comes to his contract situation?
Yeah, it was a really interesting situation. Terry was there. We were actually at a car dealership, which is pretty famous for these commercials down here, Eastern Motors. You might remember him from your Georgetown days. So Terry had shot a whole commercial. He had been there a while. And when he decided it was time to sit down and talk, he was clearly very, very frustrated. I think that's pretty evident from the reports that have come out. I got to talk to him and his agent kind of before the availability. But it's important to note that, like, when Terry wasn't talking about his contract, he was just himself. He was easygoing, laughing, talking about his offseason, how much he's been working out, all those things. But it's not a secret. These negotiations aren't going well. They seem to be pretty far apart. I think there's still plenty of time to get this done, but it's not in a good spot right now. And for Terry to come out, I mean, he always gives super thoughtful answers. Like in our business, Phil, Terry is absolutely the best because he's going to give you his time and real insight. So I wasn't surprised how in-depth he was. But the level of emotion, I mean, he got choked up at one point. I almost thought he was going to cry at one point. It was a lot for him to be that open.
JP, what is the holdup based on what you're hearing? Is it just money? Is it about his age? He is about to be 30 years old. This guy's been incredibly productive, though. He seems like an incredibly good citizen and good teammate. He's a leader for that team, which is an up-and-coming team in the NFL, obviously. And so why has this been as sticky a situation as it has been?
It's really interesting, and you're not getting a ton of straight answers from either side. I mean, what you and I know is ultimately it's money and guaranteed money and years on the deal. The one thing Terry clearly pushed back on was the age thing. He said, I didn't play my first 2 years in college, and that he hasn't been injured. He hasn't missed a game in 5 years. I mean, 5 full seasons. He's been really good, really dependable. The speed is still there. I mean, you saw the playoff run he had. I think in 3 playoff games, he went for like 250 and 3 touchdowns, including that really long one in the Detroit game where he just ran away from everybody. So my guess, and I'm going to be clear that I'm guessing, perhaps it's informed guessing, but I think, early on in this, I think there was some thought if they had to go all the way to 30 million. And then I think the other side is wondering why it isn't maybe 34. I think eventually the only way an offer is going to get signed is if the AAV starts with a 3. And I think everybody understands that. I think, Terry said he hadn't talked to anybody in a month, which is crazy. And it also leads me to believe the Commanders aren't at this point, and it's like they haven't made an offer. So the way I read the room is they've made an offer that Terry's camp thought was just too low to even respond to, and it's kind of just reached a stalemate. Now, again, it's my speculation, but there's no way they've gotten this far without at least an offer on the table. And then if you're Washington, you're like, you can't even respond? Like, what are we supposed to do here? And you got to keep in mind, this is Adam Peters' first time in the big chair. And even ownership, Josh Harris, Dan Quinn, this is the current Commanders' brain trust. This is their first big contract extension that they have to go through. And I think they want to be judicious, and they want to be sure they're not setting a precedent of going to the top of the market all the time or getting these things done in rapid fashion. And then if you look at like the rest of the market, like the four guys that signed big extensions this offseason, Jamar Chase, who I think it's either he or Justin Jefferson's the best receiver in the league. Terry's not going to get that money, right? Then you've got T. Higgins, DK Metcalf, Garrett Wilson. They're all younger. They're all in very different roles, very different stages. The Steelers traded for DK, and once you trade for somebody, you're kind of on the hook to pay what they want. Wilson's only 24, and that extension doesn't hit for 2 more years. It's hard to come up with an exact comp for who Terry McLaurin is at 29 years old. There's just kind of a lot of moving parts. I think it's a complicated, layered situation. I also wonder, because this is an extension, Terry's got a year on his current deal. So are they also wanting to convert some non-guaranteed money to guaranteed money for this year? And that just further complicates what these conversations are supposed to be. And eventually they got to start happening.
How does this ultimately play out, JP? Does he get that extension? Is there any possibility of a trade? I know that's what people watching our program tonight are wondering. It's a receiver-needy team. He looks like the perfect Patriot for a variety of different reasons. But in your opinion, what ends up happening here with Terry McLaurin?
Well, dude, I got to confess, I wasn't even aware of the New England fan base thinking they were getting Terry until you and Curran texted me this afternoon. And then I saw Breer's video, which got aggregated and was completely inaccurate compared to what Breer said. Correct me if you think I'm wrong, but the way I understood what Albert was saying was the Commanders and Terry have a week to really work on this thing, and it'll probably happen. It makes too much sense for both sides, but if he became available, the Patriots would be interested. To me, if Terry McLaurin became available, a lot of NFL teams would be interested. I don't think he's becoming available, honestly. I think they get this done. I think there's still plenty of time. Zach Ertz said the other day, I think on Kay Adams' podcast, that it's the middle of July. We don't play till early September. I think there's a few different factors. One, Terry McLaurin means so much to this organization and the Washington fan base that I don't think ownership that has really regained the trust of fans down here after 25 years of misery. Like, I just don't see them not getting to the finish line. I think, AP wants to run his ship right. And if you look at how San Fran did their negotiations, a lot of time they're contentious right up until the end. And it's amazing how an 8-figure check can change people's feelings, right? And further, dude, if you look at the Commanders' offense, which was really good, really explosive last year, you add Deebo Samuel, you add Laramie Tunsil, clearly they're in it to compete right now. If you remove Terry McLaurin from that offense, Deebo's a unique puzzle piece. He's an excellent player, but he's not a route runner. You know what I mean? Like, he's not like a pure receiver. You take Terry off that offense, your top pure receiver becomes Noah Brown. And then you're talking about Luke McCaffrey, a guy they drafted last year but he didn't have much production as a rookie. They drafted another kid this year in the 4th round, Jalen Lane, and there's real excitement about him, but he projects as like a punt returner slot guy. Like, if you take Terry off this offense, I do think Cliff Kingsbury and Jaden Daniels can manufacture some offense, but you lose verticality in your offense. And I can't imagine they want to do that.
Now, you mentioned Adam Peters' background in San Francisco. He also does have some background here in New England, JP, under Bill Belichick. Yeah. And would it not be a Belichickian kind of move to deal Terry McLaurin for the right kind of return? So I ask you this. Would a first-round pick potentially entice the Commanders to deal away this guy who means so much to them?
If you asked me that in April before the draft, I think it's a different conversation because then they can draft somebody there that helps them now. But what is the point in late July, early August for a first rounder next year when you're trying to compete this year? And you just traded for Debo, you just traded for Laramie Tunsil. Yes, I suppose if this thing gets so far down the line that they do have to consider a trade, would a first rounder probably have to be included? Yeah, but I'd almost think they'd want a player instead, like somebody else that gives them verticality in the offense. If we were having this conversation draft week, I think it's different. But is that a big help now? And between getting Vrabel up there and maybe Drake May takes a step forward, what do you expect the Pats to draft? Like 15th, 13th, 18th? I'd rather have Terry than the 16th pick next year.
All right, JP Finlay, NBC4 in D.C., thanks as always for your insight. And thank you, honestly, for just crushing the hopes and dreams of all Patriots fans, hoping that Terry McLaurin might eventually make his way to Foxborough. Always great to talk to you, buddy.
Thank you. Never say never in the NFL, man. But I just don't see it happening. Terps Hoyas, I do see happening.
All right, so there you have it. JP Finlay not all that confident that Terry McLaurin is going to become available for the New England Patriots, but certainly a situation to keep an eye on. This guy's going into the last year of his deal. He is going to be 30 years old, although, as JP mentioned, and I have argued this same point, he's kind of a young 30. He was a late bloomer at Ohio State, and he ended up being there for 5 years. So he was a little older than guys like A.J. Brown and D.K. Metcalf when they came into that 2019 draft class, but his usage was about the same. So even though he's older than those guys, he doesn't have the same kinds of miles that a typical 30-year-old star receiver would have. I actually believe in that. The guy's been incredibly durable. By all accounts, he takes incredible care of his body. And so I wouldn't be scrutinizing the age thing, although I understand it is a thing and the Commanders have to consider it. I wouldn't be scrutinizing it to the point where I might actually lose this guy because he is too damn important for a team that is too damn close to competing for a championship right now. And if the Patriots aren't waiting to swoop in, I don't know what they're doing. But if he became available, given what the Patriots did in their pursuit of Chris Godwin, just trying to bowl him over with massive sums of money, they did make a play for DK Metcalf, and they were wondering if we trade for you, you're going to come here and sign long-term? I think based on where he ended up in Pittsburgh and the fact that the Patriots did not trade for him is an indication as to what his answer would have been to that question from New England. Like Godwin, like Calvin Ridley, Metcalf wasn't dying to come here. And so how can you get great players to come here that play that position? You can trade for them as long as they'll agree to signing a long-term deal. And again, I don't know if McLaurin would be interested because there sure as hell would be a lot of teams interested in him if he became available. But the Patriots would be able to provide him as much or more money than anyone else. They have over $60 million in cap space available to them right now. And they have draft picks. And if you're asking me, would I be willing to give up for Terry McLaurin? The more I've thought about it, and the more I've looked into just where this group of weapons ranks league-wide, and just how far behind they are, specifically at the receiver position, and just how difficult it's been for them to get the kinds of guys who can really change the picture there for them, I would strongly consider giving away a first-round pick for Terry McLaurin because of all that he brings to the table, on the field and off. And I don't want to push the off-the-field stuff too much because if you're him, you might be getting a little sick and tired of hearing about what a good guy you are. And you might just want to be paid like a great receiver, which he is. You almost wonder if he was more of a diva, if people would look at him a little bit differently. And maybe this is part of the reason why he's started to chirp about his contract situation. Maybe the Commanders, in their heart of hearts, they're not worried about him showing up to camp. They're not worried about him playing in 2025 because they know he's a great teammate. He's a good guy. It's in his nature to show up, and maybe that works against him. It shouldn't. They shouldn't allow it to come to that, but maybe that's at play here. But all of those reasons make him the perfect Patriot. He is a Chris Godwin type. They're not exactly the same in terms of their games, but some of the same reasons they were so interested in Chris Godwin would be the same reasons that they would be really interested in Terry McLaurin if he became available. All right, so let's put a pin in the McLaurin story for now. Let's move on to a little bit of a preview of Patriots training camp. I mentioned that I would give you some breakout candidates. We've got 5 of those. I've also got 5 different camp battles to watch. So let's rock and roll with those right now and start with the breakout candidates. And the name for me, you might argue, is not necessarily a quote-unquote breakout candidate, but I'm going to put him here because I think there's an opportunity for him to be used more than he's ever been used before. I think there's an opportunity for him to be featured in this Josh McDaniels offense. What I saw from him in OTAs and minicamp was electricity. He was moving at times at a different rate of speed from the other guys on the field, and the name that I'm mentioning here right off the bat is Pop Douglas. I really think there's an opportunity for him now to sort of establish himself as one of the top slot guys in football. Again, that's because of what I know he brings to the table as an athlete, but also because of what I know he is now allowed to be working with in an offensive coordinator in Josh McDaniels, who will feature that position, in my opinion. And again, they don't have a lot of other options, okay? And I understand Stephon Diggs. He looks good, and he might be ready for week 1 even. But to me, even if he's playing inside, that should not take away from the workload that should be coming Pop Douglas's way. So he's my breakout candidate number 1. Breakout candidate number 2, he needs to get signed. As it stands right now, as we're recording, at 4:47 on a Friday, just about an hour away from getting in the chair and settling in for an early edition that the people are going to absolutely love. TreVeyon Henderson is unsigned. A lot going on there. These second-round picks getting guaranteed contracts. Are they? Aren't they? How, to what lengths, I should say, are these NFL teams willing to go in order to lock these guys up? Obviously, it's coming down to the wire, but you're starting to see some of the dominoes slowly fall in the second round in terms of what these players are getting. So my assumption is TreVeyon Henderson will be signed, will be at camp when camp begins, but he is my breakout candidate number 2 because, in my opinion, for a team that is as talent-starved offensively as the Patriots are, you don't draft a running back in the second round unless you plan to feature him. Now, that doesn't mean they won't use Ramondre Stevenson or Antonio Gibson, but they need to use TreVeyon Henderson and the vast skill set that he brings to the table, because I believe he can run between the tackles. I believe he can be used as a traditional third-down back. I believe he's already ready, pro-ready, as a pass protector and a safety valve out of the backfield for Drake May. And so he's my breakout candidate number 2. We saw flashes in the spring. I think we'll be able to see exactly what he'll be able to do and what he'll be able to bring to the table when the pads come on in training camp, because you'll get some pass protection drills. You'll get him lined up on a linebacker or maybe even an outside linebacker coming in off the edge, and you'll watch him scan. And you'll see his ability to diagnose. If you watch him show up to training camp and you watch him closely, he's hunting. He's hunting when he's in that situation and he's being used as a pass protector. It's almost like having an extra offensive lineman out there. It should allow Drake May to feel even more comfortable in the pocket because he's got that guy by his side. I feel that strongly about TreVeyon Henderson. We will see it play out in camp. Who knows? Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe I'll have egg on my face. Maybe he'll get trucked on a daily basis. I just don't envision that happening. He's breakout candidate number 2. Number 3, Josh Farmer. Have the people forgotten about Josh Farmer already? This is a day 3 draft pick out of FSU, dealing with some things physically that forced him to slide, but he is the perfect Mike Vrabel defensive lineman. Violent hands, good size, can be used in passing situations, can be used in running situations, in my opinion. He's a mature player in terms of, I think, his refinement. Now, that'll be tested. Again, when the pads come on a few days into camp, we won't see it right away, but a few days into camp, those pads come on. That'll be Josh Farmer's time to shine. And we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Now, he's not going to supersede guys like Christian Barmore or Milton Williams on the depth chart. But I could see him having a role, a rotational role, early in his career. So, sometimes with these guys, if you're worried about their long-term prospects health-wise, you're trying to get the most out of them while they're with you. And so I think rookie Josh Farmer could end up making an impact for the Patriots. He maybe fits the title of true, quote-unquote, breakout candidate more so than those first two names I mentioned, because not that Pop Douglas is a star. Travian Henderson certainly is a star already, but you're expecting big things from guys like that. Will Campbell's not on this list. It's not because I don't think he'll be just fine at left tackle. I do. He's a first-round pick. He's a top 5 pick. Does it really count as a breakout if he ends up having a pretty good camp? I guess. Not on next Pats, okay? Next up, breakout candidate number 4. You thought we were going to get through a whole podcast episode without talking fullbacks? What are you, nuts? Brock Lampe out of Northern Illinois. Worked with James White last year. James White was the one who told us months ago, as soon as Brock Lampe was signed, he's making the team. Yep. He's going to make the team, and Josh McDaniels is going to know how to use that guy. Josh McDaniels is going to want a fullback. Jakob Johnson, James Devlin, Heath Evans. The list goes on and on. We don't have enough time to lay them all out there for you. I feel as though, if you're looking at this roster, the best candidate to be the next guy is Brock Lampe. Now, again, maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe it'll end up being somebody who can actually give them a little flexibility, tight end and fullback, because I think Lampe is really a true fullback. But could it be somebody like C.J. Dupree, the undrafted rookie, a fellow undrafted rookie, out of Alabama? Great size. Just looks like the prototype as a Y tight end. You're talking 6'6"-ish, 260-ish pounds. At a position that's not incredibly deep. And so to have that versatility, if he can do it, a line in the backfield and lead block and just have that mentality and have that nose for contact, have that thirst for violence. If he's got it, maybe that gives him a better shot than Lampe even to be that next guy in line for McDaniels. But right now we'll give it to Lampe, so he's breakout candidate number 4. Keep an eye on him. We're going to see some fullbacks. Breakout candidate number 5. We featured him on the podcast before. I'm not going to say Efton Chisholm. I'm not going to do it. Not yet, at least. It's Craig Woodson, the safety out of Cal. I think he quietly was one of, if not the best, rookie throughout the spring for the New England Patriots. Now, again, some of the linemen didn't even really get a chance to do much. So, Will Campbell, you're not blocking anybody in pads. Hard to assess anything one way or the other. Travian Henderson, again, we saw it in flashes, and so maybe he would get ultimately the honors for me. Efton Chisholm was fantastic in the opportunities he was given. But Craig Woodson's out there with the ones. He's out there in the deep part of the field. He's out there playing in the box. He's being used in a versatile manner, and I just think, boy, if they're going good on good, right? And if Kyle Duggar, for instance, is at all limited, which obviously he was late last year, and he was through the spring as well. So let's keep an eye on his health. You're going to need matchup options at that safety spot to take on opposing tight ends. And so if Josh McDaniels is rolling out 12 personnel with Austin Hooper and Hunter Henry, you got your Brill Peppers, and he's helping in that regard for sure. But Craig Woodson could end up being a guy that we see matched up on one of those two. And that, to me, is going to be appointment viewing. And if he holds his own, maybe creates a turnover or two over the course of training camp, we're going to be calling him a breakout candidate, and we're going to be calling him one of the matchup weapons that Mike Vrabel has to play with for the foreseeable future, because this is the way the league is going. We talked about it on the Patriots Talk podcast. More tight ends, more multi-tight end sets, 12, 13 personnel. You need guys that can match up with those players. And Woodson, at least as it stands right now, looks like a pretty good option to do exactly that. The Patriots are pretty well suited right now to handle where the league is going with Peppers, with Duggar if he's healthy, with Woodson. But Woodson, I think, could very quickly establish himself as somebody to rely on for Vrabel and the Patriots. All right, let's get to a few of our camp battles. We'll roll through these really quickly, and then we will get to our mailbag and fire off some answers for you there. Camp battles to watch. I'm going to start at running back. How about Gibson v. Stevenson? Just mentioned it. Henderson's going to have a role. You know that. Second-round pick, that's a heavy investment. And there's still an investment being made in Ramondre Stevenson. I don't believe, I wouldn't predict that he'll get cut, for instance. You'd be losing a little bit in the way of cap space there, and you're eating significant dead money. And at that position, a guy with his skill set, physically still, he's certainly capable. He's just got to get the fumbles figured out. I mean, that was a massive issue last year. And if he can't get it figured out, he might lose his number one overall running back gig to Antonio Gibson. Gibson's a big body. Different running styles, but runs hard. He can run between the tackles. He can certainly catch the football. To me, he was the better running back for the Patriots last year as compared to Stevenson. If that happens again in camp, Mike Vrabel's a new head coach, obviously, and I know he has said, he's on record saying, Ramondre Stevenson's going to play a big role for them this year. That's not written in stone. And so if one guy shows up in a way that the other doesn't, I really think there could be a rep gap here. So just something to keep an eye on. Again, not necessarily predicting it, but I believe in Antonio Gibson. And Ramondre Stevenson, in my opinion, has had 2 difficult seasons in a row. So let's just keep an eye on that. Camp battle number 2. How about Jared Wilson, the rookie 3rd-round pick, the center out of Georgia, and Garrett Bradbury? Garrett Bradbury was released to Minnesota for a reason. Could the rookie potentially push the veteran to be the starting center? He might even push to be the starting left guard, depending on what happens with Cole Strange and how he looks, or Caden Wallace and how he looks. But I really do think if Jared Wilson's healthy, and he wasn't really for the bulk of the spring, we didn't see much of him in team drills, certainly. If he's healthy and he's capable, do you not have to consider that? Garrett Bradbury, to me, the reason to like him, veteran presence, veteran center for a still young quarterback working in a new system. He can help him sort out different situations at the line of scrimmage. Not as well as David Andrews probably would have been able to, given that he's been in this Josh McDaniels system, which leads me to wonder again why you don't even want to see that guy at all in training camp. Story for another day. But he might be able to do that, at least initially, better than Wilson. I think Wilson's a better scheme fit. Bradbury, to me, looks small out there. I think the Patriots are going to want to lean on opposing defensive lines. He just looks like sort of a misfit in terms of the style that they're going to want to at least run the football with. Downhill, duo, power, counter. To me, Wilson's the better option there over Bradbury. But maybe you go with Bradbury just because of the veteran experience. Something to keep an eye on. And you heard me mention Caden Wallace before. I guess it's worth mentioning him now. I think Cole Strange has the inside track on the left guard job, but we'll see. I think Caden Wallace will get time in there. I think Sidney So could get time in there. That thing is still very much up for grabs, in my opinion. So another camp battle to watch on the line. Camp battle number 3. Kyle Williams v. Efton Chisholm. There's that name. I know you've been waiting for it. Now, these guys are not the same kind of player. And I'm not saying that they're necessarily competing for a roster spot even. I am curious, though, who will have the bigger camp, so to speak. Tom Curran is on record. He's predicted it'll be Chisholm. And to me, he was probably the more consistent and had more volume in terms of production kind of receiver this spring. But that's a whole different kettle of fish. Now, we're going to see pads involved. It's going to be much more competitive. I still think Chisholm's going to show up. But I also think as a 3rd-round pick, Kyle Williams is going to be given all kinds of opportunities, maybe opportunities that Chisholm won't have, to work with quarterback Drake May. So let's see how it goes for Chisholm. Let's see how it goes for Williams. Williams, I love the release package. I love the speed. Let's see on his hands. The hands looked okay in the spring at Washington State. They were not always reliable. And let's just see on the route running too and the ability to create separation. That's one area where if you watch Chisholm versus Williams, to me, at least in the spring, there was no question as to which guy was better suited to uncover in tight spaces. Chisholm's ability to decelerate, to me, is really, really good. And again, pads come on, maybe he's getting jammed at the line, whereas Kyle Williams, to me, has great quickness at the line. And again, the release packages, to me, are very advanced and very good. So Williams could ultimately end up being the much more productive camp receiver. But I'm curious. Both guys look like great professionals. They were just, if it wasn't every day, it was almost every day, the last players, offense or defense, off the field during these OTA and minicamp practices. Just getting extra work on the jugs machine with the quarterbacks, grinding. And so you have to love that from both guys. And I think there's a real chance that both end up making the roster. I'm just wondering, which one grabs more headlines maybe this summer. Interesting camp battle to watch there. Craig Woodson, there's that name again. Marcus Jones, okay? That's sort of an interesting battle for maybe your nickel defender. Marcus Jones, undersized. Much better option to cover somebody like an Efton Chisholm if an opposing offense has that type of slot receiver. But if the NFL is getting bigger and it's getting more physical and the formations are getting a little bit more condensed and running the football has become more paramount. Now, I love Marcus Jones's play style. He is violent for somebody who is his size. And he's a really good tackler, in my opinion. But is Woodson maybe a better matchup? Again, if you're seeing more tight ends on the field, if you're going to need to have a nickel defender who can really tackle and really defend the run, Woodson's just a bigger guy. And so is he better suited to do that? He looks like he is wired in a way that would lend him to be a physical player as well as a pro. So that to me is a really interesting battle. And the last one I'll list off here, another defensive battle for us to watch. It's at that linebacker spot. Off the ball linebacker. I think you've got two pretty clear top guys off the ball. And you might not see much more than two on the field at one time. It's Robert Spillane and it's Christian Ellis. Those are the guys who got paid. Remember, Christian Ellis got over $7 million guaranteed this offseason to come back and play for the Patriots. That's a pretty penny for somebody, especially who plays that position and who does not have a ton of experience as like a full-time defender. So they saw something they really, really liked in Christian Ellis to be able to bring him back. Robert Spillane, obviously, same deal to go out and get him in free agency. Who's the third guy, though? Because they went out and they got Jack Gibbons, and he has experience in Vrabel's defense, and he has experience with Terrell Williams. And so is it going to be him? Is it going to be Dr. Gibby? Or is it going to be Jelani Tavai, who, bigger body? Again, hey, if the NFL is moving more towards, rushing efficiency and a willingness to run the football, you get a 250-pound guy there who can play off the ball in Jelani Tavai. If he's healthy, it sounds like the injury he suffered in the spring is not so significant that it's going to remove him from the season. But I just wonder, do you go with the bigger guy? Do you go with the guy who knows the system maybe a little bit better? That, to me, will be a really interesting battle to watch. All right, my computer has absolutely crapped out on me late in the podcast here, but we're going to go with the phone, and we're going to go right to the mailbag, and we're going to go right to our friend, Claire Cooper, who says this for her pre-camp question. Looking at the Pats roster, as if you could add any player from any other NFL team roster, not including quarterbacks, who would you steal and why? Let's just go Terry McLaurin there. We're going to handle this like a lightning round, Claire, and we're just going to fire through these things, as many of them as we can. Terry McLaurin, he's everything they need. Yeah, sure. Would you rather go younger? Would you rather have Garrett Wilson? Yeah, I might. Okay. So, but I'm going at the receiver position, and I'm going with somebody who has a little speed to take the top off the defense, but also is a reliable player, somebody you could go to on third down. That to me is what I'm looking for. I love Terry McLaurin. If he just even solves that position for you for the next 2 years, it's worth it to give up whatever you need to in terms of the money and almost whatever you need to in terms of the picks. Again, I'd be thinking about it first. I really would be. Especially if that's what it would take to pry him away from Washington. Football Madness 2025 says, will Stephon Diggs be placed on the PUP to start camp next week? And if so, will he be able to participate in practices during that time? I want to emphasize I'm guessing here. I don't know. So maybe this guess will be old by the time it hits the internet. I'm going to guess that he's not on PUP. He was a significant enough contributor this spring that I would almost be surprised if he landed on the physically unable to perform list, because even though he was limited and he didn't do full speed team drills, he didn't look that far off. And he did enough in these practices, to me, to suggest that the team will want him out there to get a better gauge for what he could do. He was by no means limping around out there and looked like a guy who wasn't ready. He looked like a guy that the team was purposefully holding back in order just to give him a little bit more time to recover from that ACL injury. So I'm guessing, but I'm going to guess no on PUP for Stephon Diggs. Tom McGee says, who are the Pats going to annihilate in Super Bowl 60? TBD. TW Pender says, Phil, love the pods. Thanks, TW. There's a lot of buzz for our undrafted free agents. I feel like Bill always wanted to put one on the team as a way of showing you can earn your place. This year, Larison, the running back out of UC Davis. Chisholm, Efton Chisholm. Conley, Jack Conley, the guard out of BC. Lampy, Brock Lampy. All have a shot. Not to mention Wooldridge. He's the Ben Wooldridge third-string quarterback right now. How many make it? Great question, TW. If I had to guess, right now, I'd give you 2 with a dark horse third. Right now, I'm guessing, give me Chisholm and Lampy. My dark horse is Larison. They're going to be using running back types in the kicking game, special teams, return guys are going to need to be able to break tackles. Can he separate himself there? Would be really interesting to see. Great story. Again, another guy that we featured here on the pod. Go back and check out our episode specific to Lan Larison. But I would go with 2 for now. Ant wants to know, who do you see as the odd man out of the receiver room? They seem a bit crowded at the position. They do, Ant. And so we've gone over this before, but let's do it again because I know so many people are so interested in how this room might look. To me, there are only a handful of locks, okay? Kyle Williams is a lock, in my opinion. Mac Hollins, if he's healthy, and he wasn't healthy in the spring either. Mac Hollins, if healthy, is a lock. That's 2. Demario Douglas is a lock to me. That's 3. Stephon Diggs, if healthy, is a lock. That's 4. Now, my 5th guy would probably be Kayshon Boutte, based on how frequently he was used as a top grouping receiver in the spring. Then you get your Efton Chisholm. That's when we start talking about Efton Chisholm. Now, that would be a 6th, and maybe that's too many. I don't know if he's going to be able to play special teams. He was not an elite punt returner by any stretch in college, and so maybe he can't, and maybe that keeps him off the roster. But I would go with him over Jalen Polk until Jalen Polk shows us that he can give this team a little bit more. I might go with him over Kendrick Bourne. It's a possibility. Let's just put it that way. I'm not sure Bourne is a lock, although I'm not ruling him out of making the roster either. Bourne Boutte, that could be an interesting matchup moving forward. Does Josh McDaniels just feel more comfortable with Bourne because he's worked with him before? Does he understand the system better? Like, these are the kinds of things that are going to factor into this. But to me, Bourne, Boutte, not necessarily locks, but have a shot. Chisholm, certainly not a lock, but has a shot. 6 to me feels like a healthy number. Maybe it's a little too healthy, but it feels healthy to me, and I think you got to try to figure out a way. Maybe it's Diggs on PUP, and that's your way of getting your 7th and being able to keep him and prevent him from getting to waivers, and you get him on the practice squad, and maybe that's the path for somebody like Chisholm. But that to me is how I see it shaking up right now. Boutte as the 5th, Chisholm, Bourne, kind of on the fence right now between those two as to the 6th. But I guess I would lean Bourne based on his experience. We haven't even seen Chisholm in pads yet. Let's not get crazy, all right? Let's reel it back in. Let's keep our composure here. Camp hasn't even started yet. Golly. Okay, last one here. The Patriarch Tree. Over under. How many games will Drake May miss this season due to injuries? Let's end it on a high note, shall we? The Patriarch Tree. It is a good question, though, and it is something that he's going to have to keep in mind. Unbelievably, it goes without saying, important that he stays on the field. He has to protect himself in the open field. I go back to not necessarily the first concussion against the Jets. That hit came from behind. He probably pushed it a little bit too far. He probably should have understood. I'm just kind of out here floating around in open space, and the odds are somebody's about to take my head off and get down sooner than he did. The one I keep coming back to, though, I give him a little bit of a pass on that one because of where the hit came from, is the one along the sidelines against the Chargers late in the season. He ended up going to the tent, evaluated for a concussion. I thought he had a concussion. He dropped the ball. His arms basically, his brain told his arms to just go, let go of everything before he even hit the ground. That to me is a concussion. But he got drilled, came back in the game. Why, I don't know. Came back in the game. That's the kind of hit he has to avoid. That was almost Jimmy Garoppolo-esque. And if you're a longtime listener to the pod, you know how I feel about Jimmy Garoppolo and how sage he was when it came to taking care of himself out on the field. He wasn't. And so that's not a habit that you want to see develop in Drake May, clearly. So over-under, I think he is going to run a bit, and so maybe that prevents him from making every start. I'm going to put the over-under at 2.5. And I think if you're the Patriots, you're hoping he hits the under there. Goes without saying. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of the Next Pats podcast. Thanks so much for listening. We're going to have so much content for you next week when camp gets rolling, so make sure you're with us for all of that. Thanks to JP Finlay again for sharing all his intel on Terry McLaurin. We'll be right back here next week with another edition of the Next Pats podcast. We'll talk to you next time.